Okay, so what makes a good leader? Scott Morrison is now a global public speaker, and the website that promotes him describes him as the true definition of a leader. Malcolm Dawes is an authority on people, performance and effectiveness. He's written extensively on this area. Mr. Dawes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tom. How are you?
Well, good. So before we get into ScoMo and other leaders or potential leaders, what makes a good leader?
I think a good leader has a combination of things, and I guess one of the things that I think they bring is it's not power which comes from their position, their title, what's on the door as in their business card. It's really from that personal ability they have, and I think there's a lot of different quotes and phrases, but I think leaders do the right thing. In other words, they adjust what needs to be done in order to succeed, depending on the people that they're working with. Whereas managers, do the right, do things right. In other words, they follow the rules. So I think we sometimes, or not sometimes, but very often now see people trying to stick to the playbook. And follow the rules and think that's the way it's going to work. And we've seen that in UK politics. We've seen it locally here in politics and indeed elsewhere in industry and in celebrity and in sport. And I think, what makes a good leader is somebody who has that paradoxical blend, to quote some research which was done many years ago, the paradoxical blend, if you like, of personal rather than positional attributes, and the paradoxical blend of having a bit of humility, I guess, and still having the professional will to succeed.
And do you think also that a crisis can sort of bring out leadership? I mean, for example, we go back to World War II. Winston Churchill was sort of pretty much finished in the political world. And then, because of the start of the war and the failure of the previous leadership, suddenly he became Prime Minister. And he, particularly during the German bombing campaign in 1940 and 41, he sort of energised the British people and became one of the great wartime leaders, even though he was voted out before the end of the war. But if it hadn't been for that crisis, we might never have known of Churchill's capacity for leadership.
That's very true, and you're absolutely right. And whilst I'm interested in World War II, I wouldn't put myself as a World War II historian, but absolutely, and Winston Churchill did, lead, and I do use the word lead. He did lead the people through that war, and he knew what he had to do, both from a strategic point of view, but also what he needed to do at home with the people. And as you rightly say, he was not particularly popular before and after that particular crisis. But if you look at the crisis that we've gone through. I heard on your program earlier on about when Mr. Morrison went to the fires back in the early 2020, late 2019, early 2020. He sort of missed the beat there, and that was quite a crisis. The COVID crisis, of course, which we're still just sort of coming out of, he certainly missed the beat there. And I think crisis can bring out the best in leaders, providing they've got that ability to be a bit light on their feet, I guess. They need to move and adapt and change with what the people dictate.
Do you think, of course, the other big crisis we've had, particularly in Victoria over the past couple of years, has been the COVID-19 pandemic. How would you rate our Premier, Daniel Andrews' leadership?
It's an interesting question. I'm based in New South Wales, and I've talked to many of my friends and colleagues who live down there in Victoria, and it's the same as most leaders. Have they done a good job or not? My observation would be that Dan Andrews probably did a pretty good job. That's not to say that his politics is right or wrong, but he seemed to do the right thing. I think Gladys Berejiklian here also seemed to do the right thing as well. That was a crisis which was, could have been not avoided, but we could have been far better prepared. And I think that's another thing to do with leadership is the preparation. Yes. And again, I heard you're talking about, the floods currently affecting Victoria, which has sort of moved from here in New South Wales into your neck of the woods, and preparation, ability to, again, not necessarily do things by the playbook and not necessarily hold on to your cash, but, use it wisely to help with these sort of situations. That, again, is, I think, what makes a good leader is the ability to adapt and change and be flexible with their approach and with their behaviour. Finally,
and very quickly, would you like to nominate which Australian Prime Minister you think has been the best leader?
Wow.
Could be Kevin 07, could be Julia Gillard, could be...
Well, Well,
John Howard.
Do you know what? I arrived in this great country 23 years ago, nearly, when John Howard was in power. And whilst it was a bit of a challenge to get a visa, I'm now an Australian citizen, I'm pleased to say. And I would say that he did some really great things. And I think particularly the Port Arthur massacre, the way he was able to deal with that, I thought he really stuck his neck out for in terms of his political career. But my word, did it pay off? And I would sort of put it. I don't necessarily agree with all his politics, but I think he's probably one of the better ones in the 20-odd years I've been in Australia.
Thank you for your time. That's Malcolm Dawes there, Authority on People Performance and Effectiveness. And